Outside India's Foreign Office, even in the dark, it was clear diplomatic tensions had spilled over.
Canada has provided credible, irrefutable evidence of ties between agents of the government of India and a murder of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil.
In an extraordinary moment of transparency, the RCMP, usually loath to comment on active investigations, weighed in.
The team has learned a significant amount of information about the breadth and depth of criminal activity orchestrated by agents of the government of India.
And more than a dozen threats of violence leveled at members of the South Asian community.
There is credible evidence that the government of India, through agents in Canada, has been involved in homicides, plural.
One of the homicides in question, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who supported the movement for Khalistan, an independent Sikh state, gunned down in his pickup in Surrey last year. Canada expelled 6 diplomats it says are implicated in criminal activity. India said it told them to come home because they were no longer safe in Canada. In a statement, the government of India said it strongly rejects these preposterous imputations and ascribes them to the political agenda of the Trudeau government that is centered around vote bank politics.
We don't want to be having this fight, but obviously the killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil is not something that we can ignore as a country.
Despite the expulsion of the diplomats, skepticism Sikhs will be any safer in Canada.
The Indian consulates and embassies, they have their people on the ground. They have people that they work through. So those networks are still intact. So will it have a major impact on the violence facing Sikhs? I have my doubts.
Diplomatic relations with India have already been frosty.
This is going to put them in the icebox.
This former national security advisor to the Prime Minister's office says there's little Canada can do to hold the diplomats accountable.
The bottom line is, in the course of history, this is not rare. During the Cold War, everybody spied against everybody else, and the only thing that we could do is kick people out and be more careful about whom we let back in.
In a little tit-for-tat, India did some expulsion of its own. It's given 6 Canadian diplomats until the 19th to leave the country. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
We have political reaction from our reporters in both Canada and India tonight. David Cochrane is in Ottawa, while Salima Shivji joins us from Mumbai. So let's start in the nation's capital. David, let's talk timing here. Why did the RCMP and the federal government take action right now?
Well, Adrienne, what's driving this was what Mike Duhem, the commissioner, talked about, that significant threat to public safety, that in spite of the Prime Minister's allegations of India's involvement a year ago in September, the arrests made in the Nijjar killing in May, that the violence just continued and was in fact escalating. More threats, more extortions. There are 13 duty of care warrants active right now. That is when the RCMP gets information that someone's life is imminently in danger. So it just shows how much it had been escalating. So they decided to confront India with the evidence they had of the involvement of their diplomats. And Adrienne, it led to this extraordinary meeting where the Deputy Minister of Global Affairs, the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, and one of the Deputy Commissioners of the RCMP flew all the way to Singapore to present the evidence to Narendra Modi's National Security Advisor. And the evidence was essentially rejected out of hand. It became very clear India wasn't going to stop. It became very clear India wasn't going to cooperate. So they felt, in the interest of public safety, they were left with no choice for the police to go public with their warnings and for the federal government to issue the expulsion orders to the Indian diplomats.
And can you walk us through what these 6 diplomats are actually being accused of?
Yeah, so it's the High Commissioner from India to Canada and 5 other diplomats. And essentially, Canada believes that they were involved in collecting intelligence. The pictures of Sikh activists who supported an independent Khalistan, their names, their associates, their pattern of life, their pattern of movements, and then sending that information back to India. Now, they aren't suspected of necessarily contracting the people who are believed to have pulled the trigger in some of these cases, but they were feeding the information that was giving them a menu of options. And the thing that struck me today, Adrienne, was the Prime Minister's language. There was no qualification, there was no prevarication, it was just a clear certainty that they believe 100% India was behind this, and that's why they kicked those 6 diplomats out of the country just before 9 o'clock this morning.
All right, David Cochrane in Ottawa. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
And let's go to CBC's South Asia correspondent Salima Shivji in Mumbai now. So, Salima, India's response so far seems pretty consistent with its past reactions.
That's right. India's reaction to this serious escalation in allegations was predictable in its fury. That strident and extremely angry tone to the statements from India's foreign ministry really very much in line with previous declarations from this government. And this time, again, a flat-out rejection of the claims, what India is calling preposterous and part of Justin Trudeau's political agenda. And it's worth noting that India basically came out with a statement first to get ahead of the news, whereas Ottawa has been trying and preferring to find quieter, more diplomatic channels to resolve this dispute. India then announced that it was withdrawing its High Commissioner to Ottawa, as well as 5 other diplomats, when in fact Canadian government officials say that they were expelled first because India had refused to waive diplomatic immunity so that police could interview them.
And Salima, how is all of this playing out there?
Well, that narrative, basically, that India recalled its envoy to Canada because of safety reasons and that it then kicked out Canadian diplomats in retaliation, that has been a top headline here in many newspapers and the preferred narrative for some. And that is what India is focused on in this diplomatic fight. Basically, what Indians believe in this, that their country is taking a strong stance towards Canada, long accused by the Indian government of harboring pro-Khalistani extremists. And with diplomatic ties eroding further, India certainly isn't inclined to back down.
All right, Salima Shivji in Mumbai. Thanks, Salima.